Hello and welcome to the 19th episode of my podcast, Historians in Conversation, which is hosted by the University of Lodz in Poland. My name is Michaël Green and my guest today is Professor Aneta Pawłowska from the Institute for History of Art at the University of Lodz. Aneta Pawłowska is the first art historian that is hosted by me in this podcast, and I am very keen to know about her motivations to engage with art history and her ideas about the connection between history and art history, the way that modern academia in Poland works, and also some of her reflections about the state of academia in general. So let me welcome Aneta to my podcast, and I hope that you enjoy our conversation. Thank you. Hello, Aneta, and welcome to my podcast. I'm glad that I finally have a colleague of mine at this podcast. Last year I had our dean talking to me, and now I'm very happy to have you. And you are actually the first art historian that I'm talking to, because until now it was mostly historians and some people that are related to gender studies from historical perspective and literary studies. So I'm very glad that I have this opportunity also to engage in a conversation with an art historian. So welcome.
Hi, hello. I'm very honored that you invited me. I hope that it wouldn't be not beyond my scope to be the very first art historian in your podcast. So I will try to do my best.
I think that should be absolutely doable. So I always start my podcast by asking the very same question of my participants about their background, because I think that a person is made by his or her childhood and family. So I wanted to ask about yours. Could you explain a little bit about your early days, about your parents, about your family? Where did you grow up?
Oh, I used to born in Łódź, and I grew up also in Łódź. My family, my parents were quite well educated, although my grandparents on my mother's side used to work in the textile factory in Łódź. Such textile factories in Łódź were very common during the 30s, the 50s, the 60s. So I would say that major of Łódź citizens used to have such background. And as I said, my parents were well educated. They finished not only high schools, but also they graduated from the universities. But when I was a very small child, my father, who finished his master's degree and this time used to take me to the waste dump in Łódź because he was at the geography, and I was stunning by the beautifulness and colorfulness of such a place, and this memory is one of my very first. So if you look enough closely, you can see the beautifulness of life in normal things, and they are somehow similar to art. And my father, after finishing his studies, used to work as a school teacher. So I have such background. Teaching students, teaching children deep inside of my mind. So I was always. I always feel some connections to the school teachers. And my father always thinking about educated with doctor's degree, but it was only his dream. He never find enough time to do so. So my parents always encouraged me to learn more, to learn longer, to learn more intensively, to finish not only high school, not only university, but also to go to the next step of academic career.
And what did your mother do?
She was pharmacist, so it was another interesting thing in my childhood that I used to spend many days in apotheques, in the pharmacy store. So I'm also very talented in the sphere of different medications, and I can very easily to find what we should take in case of any illness. So
That's a very useful skill, I would say.
yes, yes, yes. I think it's very useful, and I still, of course, for the purpose only of my family, very talented in this. I would say doctor's concept of life. So this is another thing which I was interested in during my childhood, because many other members of my family have been doctors, medical doctors. So when I was a child, I was also thinking about such career. But later on, I decided to go during the high school. I decided to go for some courses regarding art to the Museum of Art in Łódź. The Museum of Art in Łódź is a very prominent institution, and it was also a very intellectual place during my childhood. And I spent many hours in this museum, and this gave me the opportunity to take a part in the special tournament for young high school students in the topic of art history. And after this tournament, I was I had an index for the university in Poland. So I decided to go first to the Jagiellonian University to study their art history, and then I decided to move to the Warsaw University. So
We will get there in a second to the university career, but
okay.
before we get there, I wanted to ask you a bit more about this childhood, because I understand that you're growing up in the 80s,
Yes. Yes.
which was a pretty difficult time here in Poland with the military state and many changes. And from what I heard, because I didn't live here, of course, at the time, which put some limitations, but still, in your case, you did enjoy some sort of, I would say, rather normal childhood, and you could progress in your interests. Do you remember anything from that time?
Yes, I remember that time quite well. But you know, when you are a child, it's not offended you so much, because my parents were never engaged in any kind of political activity. So my childhood was quite normal. Of course, there was nothing in the shops, but this situation was for me quite normal, quite obvious, and it wasn't any problem for me. And it was also quite obvious that you couldn't go abroad, except maybe Bulgaria or Soviet Union. And during this time in Polish schools, we learned a major Russian language. So I'm quite good in Russian. I learned also English, but it was a kind of I don't know how to say, because I think it's absolutely useless, because I was sure that I will never have any occasion to go to United States or even to Great Britain to use this language. And in Poland, I think this was the manner of learning foreign languages everywhere, but not only in Poland, but in Poland it was a very strong concept of learning, that we learn of tenses, passive voices. It was like, I don't know, a kind of crossword, not learn to talk, but learn only some grammar construction. So it was rather boring, and I don't like this lectures, this lessons during my high school. Although, as I said, I was a very good child. I was always learn very hard. So I learned, but it wasn't any interest from my side. And I was thinking that we do not have many possibilities to go somewhere except of Poland or, as I said, Russian or Bulgaria. So this was the usual limitations in Poland those days. And to me, the real problem was that everything was so dark and gray, especially in Łódź, because Łódź was always during the 80s, during the early 90s, connected with the textile industry. And this is connected with a high degree of pollution inside the city. So the city was rather dark, but it wasn't a problem for me at the time.
Polish literature for children is very well developed, and I, as a child, read some Polish books translated into Russian, and I enjoyed them very much. I remember the adventures of Tomek Wilmowski and
Yes.
the four tankists and the dog that
Yes.
I enjoyed very much. And there were still books with historical background. And for me, as someone who's interested in history, I realize now that I actually explicitly chose books that had this historical element to them. So I wanted to ask you, which books did you read as a child? Or if I suppose that you were interested in reading books, because it's not that easy to find, well, children books about art history.
No, you are not true, because there was a great series of a book which was entitled Mr. Carr and something, and it was the stories about art historian who had different experience during finding some mysteries about art, and it was I don't remember actually, but it's about 10 books dedicated to this art historian. It was called in Polish Pan Samochodzik and something. And I love these books. And we have also two movies according these books. But the movies are not, in my opinion, so brilliant as the cycle of books. So this was also one of the experience from my childhood, which are standing for my academic career, because it was very interesting for me that if you are art historian, you can find so many different and very, because it was not only very interesting, but the plot of action was very similar to, I would say, a book like a James Bond, something like that. So there was the connection between interesting way of life and art history in my mind, of course, as a child, because now in reality it looks not so engaging like it was during my childhood, but this book was definitely interesting for me. And another kind of books which I loved was also historical books, but especially written by Alexander Dumas. This time of the French kings from the 17th century was also very interesting for me. I was of course interested in the historical plot of the books, but the concept of living in that time was also for me very intriguing.
If you speak about Dumas, just wonder, did you prefer the series about the Musketeers or about Henry III?
I love both. I couldn't say which I preferred because I love books from my very early childhood. And now one of the most problematical thing for me is that I do not have enough time just to read the books just for a pleasure, not as an obligation that I have to read an important article, but just for a pleasure. It was great fun for me. And when I was a child, there wasn't any computers, things like that, and there wasn't also any interesting movies in the Polish TV, also in theaters. So I think that books were much more important for the children, for people than nowadays, because we have plenty of opportunity to see movies, to go abroad, to do many different things. Of course, look at our smartphones or look at the internet. So it's a different story.
So by the time that you arrived, let's say in high school or Polish equivalent of high school, did you have the opportunity to pursue your interest in history or art history at the time already? You mentioned the competition, but I'm talking about the school itself. Was there anything that you could do related to your interests?
No, actually not, because when I was at high school, I was in the class which was connected with the biology and chemistry. So I learned a lot of biology and chemistry because, as I said, many members of my family was medical doctors. So my parents insist that I should go for medical school, and they would like to from my side that I learn more of chemistry, more of physics, more of biology. So this interest in art history was absolutely my own concept of living, of education. So they were not very much supportive in this concept that I would like to go to different city, and I would like to be an art historian, not medical doctor. So actually in my high school, I do not have any kind of subject which could be somehow connected with art history, although I have, of course, just normal history. So.
And then when the choice fell to go to the university, I understand that you already planned to do that and were encouraged by your parents, which is also quite interesting because comparing to some women I spoke to on this podcast from Western or Northern Europe, they said they were not exactly encouraged to do university studies. So it is interesting that in a communist country that was rather different. So how did you choose the university? Why was it Jagiellonian University in Krakow and not, I don't know, University of Łódź?
Because there wasn't art history at the university in Łódź. So I decided to go to the Jagiellonian University because it was the only university in Poland after which you could be also educated on the other part of the world, because the Jagiellonian University had such tradition that its diploma was also important in the other countries in the Western world. So I was thinking a little bit about migration from Poland. But after 1 year study, I decided to move to the Warsaw University because it was not so far from Łódź, because this journey and living in Krakow was rather expensive, and I feel slightly lonely in Krakow. So I decided after the first year to go to the Warsaw University. And during my studies, the art history at the University of Łódź was reopened after 30 years of closing of this course, because art history was always very elitary kind of study. And during the communist period, the communist government decided that it's not a kind of studies which should be for everybody. So when I was in this in my studies, there was only 3 or 4 universities with art history. So this was the reason why I decided to go to another city. But the Warsaw University was very demanding during these years when I was studying at the Warsaw University, and it was very good school, academic school, the very good university in Poland, I would say, because I learned a lot. I learned more at the Warsaw University that I used to learn at the Jagiellonian University. So sometimes I was thinking that it was better to stay at Jagiellonian University, because at Warsaw University we have many lectures connected, for example, with architectural art, which I don't like as much as painting. So it was rather harsh for me. And there were also very high stress put on the learn of German, which was for me a language which I started learned, and it was for me very complicated to learn this German enough to be graduated from the Warsaw University. So it was really harsh for me.
It reminds me a little bit of my own studies because in Israel we had double majors, so I studied general history and art history, and our art history was much more difficult for me than general history, partially because for our exams we had to remember a huge number of paintings and vases and slides and God knows what. I think we had like four or 500 of those images for the 4 introductory courses. And I remember it as a nightmare to
No,
study for this. And then we had also on the second and third year, we had history of architecture, which I actually quite liked. But then, of course, my choice was more for history. But I still use art historical elements in my work always because I think it enriches my work as a historian.
to me, this kind of learning that I have to remember the pictures, it was quite easy. I think I have some kind of natural skills to that, because I'm very good at remembering pictures, and it was always very, very easy for me. And my abilities to learn this was actually very impressive. So. So
Well,
it wasn't a problem, but to me more problematic was when we are talking about the architecture, how to clearly present the description of architecture using these complicated terms about architecture. So rather that kind of problems, not with remembering pictures and putting them in the connection to the artists and to the centuries or years. So it was rather easy to me.
it just reminded me exam that I had for an introduction to ancient art, and we had those ancient craters from Mykonos, I think, and the years were, well, let's say, for example, 732 before current era, 733 before current era, or 734. And I could never remember, was it 34, 33, or 32? So yeah, that really takes a skill. I have one more question to you related to education at the university. And that's the question of going further, because you also mentioned that your father had a dream of doing a PhD, but he never did it, and you did. Can you tell us a little bit about your motivations to do it. Why did you decide to do a PhD? You could have stopped with a master's degree and probably find a good job in some museum as a curator or museum worker. What motivated you to continue?
Yes, this was one of my first concepts to work at the museum. But as I said, the art history in Łódź was reopened after many years. And I was a few times meeting with Professor Nowakowska, who was the chief of the art history at this at the time. And I was asking her to be her PhD student because I was thinking that I don't want to stop my education now, because I started working at the foreign company at the just after my studies, and I started to boring at that company because the job was quite good and the money was also not so bad as for a young person, but it was boring. And I decided that I would like to go to PhD studies because it was more engaging for me, and because the art history at the University of Lodz was at the very beginning of its creating. It was a good moment to be a part of it. And when I started, it's a very interesting kind of job because you have very different challenges. So I decided to go for it and stay at the university. And I'm quite happy with my decision.
You arrived at the right place at the right time at the University of Lodz. And my question is, what steps did you undertake in order to ensure that you're actually going to stay at the university? Because I assume that there were also other colleagues that perhaps were writing PhD at the same time. And what did it take from you to get a job afterwards?
Actually, we do not have so many PhD students at this period at art history. So actually, I was the only one, and the other candidate was Professor Piotr Gryglewski, who was in the same time finished his PhD students. But luckily, there was a place for both of us, and Professor Gryglewski was at this time an assistant, so it was obvious that he will stay. And in my case, Professor Nowakowska, who was my supervisor during the PhD students, forced to go for her retirement because of her age, and the place after her was empty, and I was the first to replace her after my PhD studies, because it was the obligation and to be a lecturer, to have their own career. So just a few months before I finished my PhD studies, I was also a part of the member of our Art History Institute. It was an institute at this time. It was just a cathedra, so it was a smaller institute. Yes, so yeah, a part of Institute of History, because at the first we were only a part of the Institute of History, and later on, I would say after almost 20 years, we started to be an Art History Institute. It was, as you said, the right time and right place. So it was not as difficult as it is nowadays, because nowadays we have a lot of PhD students, so they must be very competitive between each other, but it wasn't during my PhD studies because we do not have so many students. Although when I was started, I have two other colleagues. They were men, and they didn't finish their PhD students. One of them finished on the other university, but the other one didn't. So it wasn't also so easy because it's always hard to study, to learn students. It's I think it's not a job for everybody.
Definitely not. And I also think that not everyone has to do a PhD unless there is a very clear goal why to do it. Doing it just for the sake of having the title, I think maybe it's a good option, but at a later stage.
Mm.
So it's something that needs to be considered. And I know, for example, among people who studied with me when I was doing my PhD, that some of them already had in mind that they're only having this title, but they don't plan on academic career and they needed it for other things, I don't know, for some career race or advancement and things like that. But there was quite a large group of people who wanted to continue in the university, but the possibilities are very, very limited.
Yes, and during end of my PhD studies, I was starting my work at the private gallery. And it was some part of this job was quite interesting, but the other part of this job, because you have to spend a lot of time just sitting in the gallery and do nothing, just sitting and waiting for a client. And it was somehow also boring for me. So I decided after 1 year working that I rather prefer to stay at the university because your time is more flexible. You can do more things which are interesting you at this particular moment. And the structures at the university are also quite flexible, that you do not have such a big boss just under you. That of course, you have supervisors. I don't say that you don't have, but they are not, in my opinion, not so. They are not looking at you so closely as a boss at the private gallery. So in my opinion, it's you have more space at the university.
I
You
think it
can do
depends on the
particular.
case.
Maybe, but in art history department, it wasn't never a very straightforward concept to be a worker, to have your supervisor just looking behind you and look at each step what you are doing. So I think that you have a lot of freedom at the university.
Besides teaching and supervising, you also are very, very active, from my own knowledge, in hunting for grants, going for different research trips. And it seems to me, as someone who just came to the university not so long ago, but I know you for now 7 years already, which is quite a long time.
Yeah.
And you are always on the go and you're always motivated to continue. So, what is this thing that burns in you? Is it the desire for advancing in career even further, though you're already a professor and there is, well, there is the possibility to become dean and rector, but is it the burning for knowledge that is motivating you? This desire to know more and more, or to meet more people
I
together?
think rather to meet more people, to meet more different situation, to be in different places. And I would say that money are always a kind of motivation, because if you have additional grants to your academic salaries, which are not very high, as you probably know, that if you combine it, you can have enough money for decent living with your family. So you you can go, for example, for nice places during your holidays. So I think it's also a kind of motivation. But the first, I would say that the challenges and differentiations that you are in the different situation, that you can go to the different places, that you can see different. In my case, it's also very important that you can see different museums, that you can see different galleries, that you can meet very different people, that you can meet a lot of artists, for example. So rather this than the pure academic interest, the pure interest of knowledge, because the knowledge is somehow, it's also important, but it's somewhere else.
I understand. And then I have one more question, which is an important question, and I think it needs to be addressed also because we are in a situation where a lot is being talked about it. So you, as a woman and as a mother, because I know that you have a child, also are put through more, perhaps, stress than some of the male colleagues or people who don't have children. So how did you navigate with having a family, with having a child, and still being very active and, I would say, successful?
My husband is very supportive, and it helps me a lot that he's supporting me in the process of taking care of our children, and he helps a lot with their, for example, schools, with picking them from the schools, with taking them for additional classes. Although because I have two daughters and one son, my son is quite difficult. So I would say that because he's the youngest child, that before him I never know what does it mean to have children, but now I know for sure. So if I would have my son as a first child, it would be my only child, because he's a very demanding child, and he doesn't like to learn. He plays a lot of on the computer, but I hope it will change. But
Most likely.
but you know, nowadays a lot of women decided that if they would like to have a career, they don't have children. They decided not to have even husbands. But I think it's there is nothing against to your career if you have children, but you have to have supportive family. If your family is standing behind you and helping you, it's not a real problem.
And the last question that I want to ask you is a question about the situation of women in the academia. In the past years, you could see that there has been some change in the number of women that were appointed professors in Poland and also in other countries, and there is an attempt to create some gender balance. Do you see significant change in the situation here in Poland in this regard?
Definitely, definitely. Nowadays we have, I would say, more women engaged in science than men. So I think it's after a few years it would be opposite, because because I'm for a long time member of the faculty council, firstly as a PhD, later on as a professor, and I can see the changes that we have not only male professors, but also constantly more women professors. So I think it will change very soon. And I'm not surprised of it, because we do have more girl students than boy students, so it would be quite obvious.
Thank you very much, Aneta, for our, I think, interesting and also enlightening talk. And I think that for our listeners, it will be very interesting to know the perspective from another part of Europe, not just from Western and Northern Europe, but also from Central and Eastern. So I thank you for taking your time to talk to me, and we will continue being in touch.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you. Bye.